Alan Ross. It's a pleasure having you on. I mean, we were just chatting offline. I've known you since 2011, I think, when you first moved to Hong Kong, having been in Singapore before that. So I've known you for a long time, enjoyed your company for a long time, and so glad you're now a guest on David Anderson Talking Market Data.
I won't say it seems longer, David.
It probably does. It probably does. We've had many a conversation, but now we're sharing our conversation. Although another thing, you and I just chatted offline. We're not going to go down the rabbit hole of all the wonderful history that you and I have shared and others. So look, just to get the thing going, Alan, can you give a brief explanation of who Alan Ross is, what his background is, why you're a credible guest on David Anderson Talking Market Data? But I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile as well in the notes.
Sure. So a little background. I've been for my sins in market data for 30 years. I've been lucky enough in that period of time to have done sort of all manner of roles and jobs. I started off in systems engineering and moved, as you do as you get a little bit older, into management. I helped design things like machine readable news and hosted solutions for Reuters and sort of moved on. And then the last sort of 10 years of my, I guess you could call it a large firm career, I was the global head of market data at UBS, where I oversaw a sort of end-to-end market data team, which I won't go into right now. But that sort of gave me lots of ideas and inspiration and has led me on to what I've been doing for the last 3 years, which is basically the founder of a company that deals with digital contracts, digital rights for specifically market data for exchanges and data publishers.
Which we're going to talk about. That probably is the main focus of this discussion. But I'm going to take you back in time as well, because I think it's fascinating. This is where I got to know you. Although I think I looked at your LinkedIn and we did work together at Reuters many years ago, but we were in very different parts. I was in the poncy old marketing and salesy bit, and you were in the hard-working engineering side of things. And
it meant you were getting paid.
And you did the work. Anyway, that's good. So those illustrious years as you ended up being sort of global head of market data of UBS. But I think it's interesting when I talk to people in those sorts of roles, a couple of things. Talking generally about sitting as head of market data in a customer firm, one interesting dynamic to that is in fact, I'm going to hit you with both questions at the same time, then we'll just talk around it. One element is, where does market data fit in within an investment bank? Or I know you didn't work in a buy-side institution, but in a big investment bank. And I mean, what underneath all of that, sometimes market data reports to IT, sometimes it reports to procurement, sometimes it reports to quote unquote the business, or operations. There's all these different things. Does it matter? Have you seen that? Sometimes it changes within an organization and the people change. And I've seen some of that manifest itself. And then the second big question about all those years you spent in market. Actually, I've got a third. The second question is cost reduction, cost containment. That seems to be the mantra for the last, 20 plus years. Isn't there more to life than cost reduction? Again, your thoughts on that. And the final point, which will be a segue into our second discussion, market data is often the commercial side of market data, the contractual terms and conditions, etc., the data, if you will. And then there's also the system side, which delivers that data. And again, you I think were more on the system side, and then you had the commercial side come under your wing. Again, I'm hitting you with a lot there. Let's just talk around those 10 years. Thoughts?
Sure. So I think you mentioned one thing around, where does market data as a service fit into an organization. And I've certainly in my time been through sort of many cycles of different strategies, and part of those strategies they kind of come from top down. So
Yeah.
you know, it's sometimes just as simple as personalities. You'll have a new maybe head of equities that comes in from a large firm that basically wants more control of their environment, and then at that point they'll say, actually, key for our day job in algo trading, automated trading, desk trading is market data. We've got operations, we've got all of these areas, but I want to make sure that the market data we're getting is guaranteed, and I don't want it to be a shared service with wealth management, as an example. So there you get sort
Bit
of
of internal friction or internal competition.
so you get dynamics depending on the sort of sell side organization, and who's considered in charge at the time. And then there's the more group strategic view. So actually, market data is a shared service, and is one area more pertinent than another for market data. And you can look at that in different ways. You can say, okay, let's look at it in terms of spend. But spend is just one dynamic. It may be actually, what is your return on investment on your market data? If you've got research teams looking at sort of reference data and historic data, maybe they're getting higher returns for the firm in terms of making sure that, for instance, clients are getting the right information out of market data. So it's a very I think individual view and discussion at a group level from sell side bank. The second part of it is then exactly what you said. Where does it report into? Is it an IT focused organization? Is it a commercially driven procurement based service? Is it a product? Is it product and service based? Should it be fitting with perhaps the other application offerings? So there's lots of different slants, and there's also should market data as a service be run end to end? So should it be managed by an individual that understands what happens at the technical side, and also the commercial side, and also perhaps the audit side, and various pieces like that.
And some firms do that. I think, was that the way UBS worked when you were there?
So that's the way UBS worked whilst I was there, and we did that, and I believe, well, I would say this, but I believe it was successful. We had some very strong individual leaders that specialised in areas such as engineering, operations, product management, commercial management, business advisory. The whole sort of exchange audit and compliance side. So we made sure that we had a nice sort of decent leadership team across those areas, and it did function as a full service back in UBS for a long time like that. And then there was also a change in strategy that sort of came the last couple of years I was there, where they felt that because the large amount of spend on market data, it was perhaps better with a category management type setup, with procurement people managing the money. There's always this, I personally think it's a little bit of a naive view that technologists can't manage budgets and so on and so forth. I think it's a little bit naive, but it is based on the fact that it's a little bit like going to university, where if you specialize in art, you can't at the same time be specializing in microprocessors. I think I personally I have a little bit more of a broader view. I think it takes people that have got good minds and good views across all of those areas, and if you can get a team to cover, then it works quite well. But again, there's 100 ways you can slice the onion to
And different, all these different firms often have sliced that onion
Yeah.
in different ways. Or I was going to say worse still, but that's a judgment call. Or they keep changing. In other words, it was done one way at XYZ Bank, and then some new manager comes in and wants to do it a different way, and it swaps and changes. I suppose change is as good as a rest.
Yeah, well, so an iterative approach to get in that it is a massive service spend for organisations, and its footprint is pretty much the whole organisation. So you want to get it correct as it possibly can be, and there's always efficiencies and there's always different ways. So you're right. Those changes happen quite a lot. Obviously, it's the frequency that's important, because you don't want to be, say, getting a year and a half into a program where you're, concentrating on, say, simplifying your global infrastructure, only for it to change and say, actually, we're going to divide the infrastructure into the Americas, Europe, and so you've got to see your strategies through, unless obviously they're very, very badly thought out.
I mean, this could be a whole conversation in its own right. But I mean, that cost containment, cost control thing. I mean, I have a dim recollection, again showing my age. I remember in the 90s, there were growth. Some of the big investment banks were just throwing money at things. It was just invest, invest, invest. And I don't know when things changed, but there definitely was a change. I mean, obviously with the financial crash of 2007, but I think it was way before that as well. There was just this focus on cost reduction. And I got the impression people sitting in the shoes that you had on when you were at UBS were just constantly, one year, we want a 5% reduction. And then, well done, Alan, you and your team, you did that 5%. We want another 5% next year, because obviously you can do it, Alan. You're really good at doing that. Can you do it again? And you do it again and again and again. And a sort of comment I would have is cutting the fat. Yeah, let's get rid of the fat. But at some point, you start cutting into muscle and mixing that metaphor terribly. How do you know what is fat and what is muscle? Who decides?
Well, I've got mostly fat, but
join the club, you and I. Yeah. There's some real muscle underneath.
I actually think it's a good thing, and I'll explain why. It's evolution. So it's a little bit like, when I started 30 years ago, the concept of change control hadn't really bedded in organizations. So, I remember going out as a field engineer and going to various banks, and there would be, something, maybe a couple of desks not working on their dealing positions, and you'd tip off down to the data center, and you'd restart things, and you'd go and ask if they're all happy, and if they were, great, off you'd go and get an early lunch. So, and then, we realized that perhaps tinkering with trading systems during the day was not the best thing to do, because there will be that one time where you break absolutely everything, and that's a huge exposure for an organization, and then let alone a regulatory issue. So what happened was you start to put in processes to look at making sure that things are done at the right time, weekends, so on and so forth. And that's all that's happened on the financial side as well. So again, even 20 years ago, you'd have vendor meetings, and the vendor would say, okay, we've got this great new product. We know that a bunch of your users will like it. If you sign up now, we'll give you, 50% discount on what it is for the next 3 years. And you go, okay, what it is. So the decision process was not a distributed decision process. There wasn't necessarily the accountability in the same way. And data has just...
There's the time.
Yeah, data has just grown, the spend has grown, and you've got to get in these checks and balances. Now, the reason I say this is a positive thing, one, it's more transparent, so that more transparency is good, but it also means that there's more people that are looking into that transparent ledger of finance and saying, actually, we can do this better, we can do that better. And that's where you get these sort of changes and shuffles of management.
And there's a lot of tools out there because I mean I have it's not yet published, but I did an episode with Alistair Brooker from MDSL, which is now Calero, and then I'm also going to be talking to TRG Screen. That whole inventory management side of things, there's counting stuff and monitoring stuff has got a lot more sophisticated over the years.
Absolutely, and that now we're in a position where we get all these wonderful metrics, and actually we don't even have to make a decision on the metrics. We can get AIs to analyze what is good and bad and ugly about the sort of data that you're getting out as well. So there's a new layer which brings in. But what I was going to say, which I think is the really positive part of are we spending correctly, is making sure that across the market data organization, that everybody from all of the different teams, be it operations, development, business analyst, business advisory, everybody is aware that actually what they're doing comes with a cost. So just as technologists should be more aware of the cost side, the procurement and cost side of that organization should also be aware of what the technology is. So if you've got that sort of cross education, I think it's win-win for everybody. But because my worry is always that when you're looking at something like market data as a service, we become very siloed, and we stop appreciating the fact that you've got smart people across all of these areas, and we just basically need to be talking.
And I mean, I think what I find it really interesting about this sort of organizational dimension, the process dimension, I think hearing what you're saying, it's got more sophisticated over the years, as frankly, our industry. I mean, you've done 30 years in marketing. I've done 40. And I mean, it was really simple in the old days. It was a green screen, but you bunged it in and that was all it's so much more complicated. Let's, I mean, we could have talked longer on that section, but let's not. Let us shift into the second section, which I think we're already beginning to touch on a little bit. The technology, the market data systems side of things, which is distinct from the market data itself. It is the systems that are used to distribute market data systems, or market data distribution systems, they were sometimes referred to. And again, you and I don't want to bore people with the history, but Triarch and RMDS and TREP, now RTDS. I'm talking from our old alma mater, the sort of Reuters, Thomson Reuters, Refinitiv, and now LSEG side of things. But there are changes afoot there. Can you paint a picture of what you see as the current state of play vis-a-vis market data systems, and is change afoot?
Sure. So actually, having a bit of history is always good, David. Much as people possibly switch off, because if you see how something has evolved and where it's got to, and the fact that there's been pauses and fits and starts in the past, it helps you sort of appreciate perhaps what's going on now. So if we go back to the rich systems, the Triarchs, that was very much the first breakout of those green screens to getting them to 50 users, 100 users, and that's where the concepts were formed. Data has to be as fast as possible. It has to be reliable. And then you need to know who's using it. So you need to understand who's entitled to it and who isn't. So there was that sort of basic set of concepts that were built on. And then larger players came in. There was Tibco and good old Tib to rival Triarch. And then there was acquisitions and RMDS and then sort of where that sort of Tib chart piece was going on, you also had Bloomberg going through their own transition as well and saying, actually, we need an enterprise platform as well, and we're not traditionally seen as the enterprise players. So they started building. So you get that sort of build up, and then you get the smaller players, which then bring in things like appliances and all of this kind of wonderful. Because then that happened with an event. So the event was, we should have ultra low latency, and ultra low latency became a big driver for market data for a while, where there was no concept of well, it's probably a little bit unfair, where cost was not the driver, it was the technology, and then it kind of equalizes again, and you sort of look at that piece, and then I think where we've got to now is the next sort of big event. We've gone through sort of data warehouses and big data and all of these other sort of large technology concepts
and cloud, and then AI.
Well, this is So where we're getting to now. And what's good about these themes? What's good about big data? What's good about cloud? Is it is actually something that everybody can appreciate. If you're in technology, you can appreciate it. If you're in finance, you can appreciate it, because they're designed as themes that people can look at it from their own perspective and go, actually, that's something that may make sense, or so on and so forth. So we are, we're definitely in the cloud and the cloud service provider era, and sort of maybe, I guess, 8-9 years ago, the larger firms were racing towards what they would be doing with cloud, how they would segment their applications.
I would challenge that word racing. They were ponderously moving in a very considered manner.
Everybody's a little bit different. So that's definitely fair. Okay, I was racing. And back then, when you just think back to, Amazon and AWS, and they were at the forefront. They put together things like pricing models, and this is how much your compute's going to cost. This is how much your storage is going to cost. This is how much your data egress is going to cost, and so on and so forth. So we all got used to following the models of basically Amazon.
Yeah.
And then obviously, Google came along and said, actually, our differentiating factor is we can do analytics and deal with the financial industries in a better way. We're less generic, we're more focused, and then there's competition, and then Microsoft said,
Oracle now are making a big noise.
Exactly. So we're now, we're now in a place where we're getting, and they're just the big Western companies. Yeah. So, and then
Alibaba and Tencent,
and so Oracle's interesting. So I find Oracle, their new proposition amazing, and they've kind of torn up the expected sheet and said, actually, let's look at our cost models slightly differently.
But I love Oracle. I think they're great. But I think it's an interesting dynamic. They are coming from behind. They're the late starter. And therefore they can rip up the rules because they didn't create, AWS sort of started it. And there's an analogy because, you've got that whole cloud set of players, but then you've got the traditional players. You mentioned Bloomberg, but then also LSEG. And I mean very specific. When I mean LSEG, I mean the bit of LSEG that was Refinitiv, not the exchange. So we're not talking about the exchange. Exchanges is another bit. But we're talking about a company that was a data aggregator, but also a system provider. And again, I'm going to put it to you. this was an issue I remember when I was selling Triarch years ago. Oh, should we buy our system from the same company that we're buying most of our data? Is that a good thing? All our eggs in one basket. Oh, but then the counter argument was you've only got one backside to kick. And by the way, we know the data really well, so we can build us. There's a million different ways of looking at it. Where do you see that argument sitting at the moment? That those 2 points of view, the sort of, should you have your system provider and your data provider as the same entity?
So I think this is where the kind of cloud piece has given us this sort of perceived pause, right? So everybody's looking at the technology for distributing data, the market data distribution piece, and it's less than obvious to everybody what's happening from cloud service providers. If cloud service providers are distributing market data, if you've got a Microsoft market data team, an Oracle market data team, then the data publishers are just the data publishers. Do they need to be in the business of market data distribution anymore if all of your major cloud service providers are able to do what Reuters of old and
I wonder. I had the same thought, but then it does seem like that traditional layer of market data systems or market data distribution systems have worked with the cloud providers. So the cloud providers haven't moved into that space. It's those existing providers have put their systems and software in the cloud and on-prem and hybrid.
Absolutely, but the question is it the business that they want to be in? If there is somebody that they can effectively outsource that to, so if you speak to, I mean, LSEG is a prime example. So they have the exchange side and they have the Refinitiv side, ex-Refinitiv side. And part of that ex-Refinitiv side, a small part of that was data distribution, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of products and services which they provide, huge amount of analytics, and the relevance of that to the actual distribution could be debated. So they, as you say, yes, these large providers of market data distribution systems are working with cloud service providers to make sure that it's not only distributed within the cloud tenants themselves, but also out to, as you say, edge and on-prem and so on and so forth. But it's a technology evolution, and I think that that's where we have an interesting time right now. So if you are a large provider and you are an incumbent, for a better word, and you are the market data manager for a large firm or medium firm or whatever it is, do you make a decision to stay where you are with incumbent systems and see what's coming out in the future? Or do you perhaps have a specific use case where you might still want to be concentrating on, say, an area of ultra low latency trading, and then you use perhaps some other players, because the incumbents may not be concentrating on their existing systems in the way that they used to be, because they've got a slightly different plan afoot.
Are you alluding to the sort of jack of all trades, master of none concept? In other words, if you had a more specialist system provider focusing on a more specialist requirement, that's a good thing. I mean, I've seen the same over the years,
Yeah.
and I've seen traditional market data systems and market data being delivered to the market data team at a bank, and then quite often an equities group sets up its own systems people. It doesn't want to deal with the generic cross bank operation. It wants to do things itself because they're special and they're important and they've got a budget to do it.
Well, that's where transparency has removed some of that I'm special, right? So unless you are special enough to be producing an awful lot of revenue for a firm, you're not really that special.
Yeah. There's degrees of specialness.
Yeah.
I think that's look, Alan. Again, that whole topic we could talk a lot about, and I got a number of guests talking about it. But I think I was looking to you as being a little bit more independent and not skin in that game. But talking about skin in the game. Now let's talk about something where you do have proper skin in the game. So your DRDM project, which I've been following with great interest. I couldn't, if I sat down in a coffee shop and somebody said, "What's Alan up to?" I probably couldn't describe it as eloquently as you do. In fact, I probably would do a very bad description. Let me start off asking you the question. What is the problem or set of problems that you set out to solve? So before you talk about the solution, which is your new offering, what was the problem that needed a solution?
So very simple, like a lot of problems that need solving, or should we say simple on the outset. We were as a large organisation dealing with simultaneous exchange and data vendor audits, between sort of 7 and 10 audits every month that we would run.
This is when you were at UBS.
Yeah,
this
2 to 3 months,
traditional,
six months. Huge amount of resource required dealing with all of the sort of questions that would come in, and fundamentally, we were good citizens, or we believed we were good citizens in our data management, meaning that we used as many entitlement systems that we could to make sure that we had data usage tracking. Even for systems that were built in-house, we would build our own in-house entitlement systems so that there was that reporting and usage. And then we had large other systems that we built, like our compliance application database to capture some of the sort of areas that were not captured by traditional sort of market data inventory systems. So, we were doing a lot to make sure that our use of data was as correct in terms of the contract and our rights to use that as possibly we could.
Because there'd be a separation. You would have discussions where you might disagree with some of those terms and conditions. You might want to negotiate those. Yeah. And that conversation would be going on. But then what we're talking about now is something different, which is, look, putting that to one side, you've signed these contracts saying here are the rules, and you've signed up to those rules. And therefore, to use your phrase, you want to comply with the rules you've signed up to.
Yeah.
But that wasn't as easy as it might have sounded, is that?
No, absolutely not. So, the first and obvious thing is that, every exchange and every data publisher has slightly different terms and conditions, to say the least.
Or even very different ones.
And I'm not one to moan about that. I believe that if you're the producer of something new and unique, then you should be able to define your terms around your new and unique product, and that's perfectly acceptable as long as it fits within a legal framework that's acceptable in a contract. I think that's fine, but you have to appreciate, if you're going across 240 exchanges as an example, there's going to be a lot of overlap, but there's also going to be some more sort of interesting things which take a lot more work. So the problem we were dealing with was effectively a large amount of fines from audits, multiple millions. I won't give you the figure. Through and then the job was basically dealing with those audits and showing what we had in place to make sure that the rights of the exchange were actually being enforced as best as can. But there's two major problems that you deal with while you're dealing with that. And the first thing is the moment you redistribute data outside of your firm to your clients, you've lost visibility of that. You're then back to relying on the honesty of your clients reporting to you that goes into the honesty of your declarations. And it just occurred to me that we've got all of these wonderful technologies out there that allows us to distribute data and get it to end clients, but we still can't do a joined up picture that looks at the rights versus the actual usage. So there was a question mark in my mind. How do we solve that? And the second big problem is that any organization that distributes market data or just use terminals or whatever, there's so many places that you would need to integrate a system if you were tracking that data at a distribution level. So there's no firm that would ever pay for that from a budget perspective, because the amount of systems integration needed would just be phenomenal. So I thought, okay, so we've got two problems here, and they just kind of, should we say, simmered along in my brain for a period of time. So when I left UBS and had after a few months of enjoying myself, I decided to do something about it. So that's where I am now.
And it's interesting that I remember phrases like honesty statements and declarations, because picking up on what you were saying, an awful lot was people saying we've done the best we can. We don't have a way of tracking or controlling, but we've done the best we possibly can. I mean, those fines you mentioned, I'm presuming you had tried absolutely. You weren't being devious. You absolutely weren't being devious or dishonest. It was so difficult to actually track all that stuff.
Yeah, and it's also an operating procedure process piece. So if you've got 2,000 applications in a firm and you've got new developers coming in from other firms, they're used to perhaps other methods, and you've got to get them organized in terms of before I get market data from here, I need to declare that this is going to be my usage. And the usage is like, we've got maybe 16 developers, but then all of a sudden they go live on a system and they haven't updated their paperwork. So you've got all of this process.
So how, when these auditors come in, how do they find all this stuff out? If the auditors are capable of finding the nooks and crannies and funny bits of data, why weren't the bank themselves able to find that?
I feel so sorry for the auditors, because in the same way that the firms themselves have the complexities with dealing with that data cleanup and making sure it's done. If you're coming as an external auditor, you've got to understand a very different usage of data in every different firm, and then the firms don't necessarily want to share the secret source on all of their applications. So there's this automatic issue where you've got to know what you can reveal and what you can't reveal, and it's just unfortunately a bit of a thankless task for everybody.
I mean, an observation I would make, because I've watched both sides, the data providers and the data consumers, and it's like fundamentally trust has broken down. I'm not certain there's trust there.
It can be. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily the case all the time. I think it's what happens is, if you are an auditor and you discover some issues, and then all of a sudden, it's like being a regulator. You discover an issue with one of the firms. You've got to make a decision. Is it done because they're doing it maliciously, or is it because they've got no idea, or is it because they're incompetent. So there's a whole raft of
But in law, isn't it the wonderful statement, ignorance of the law is no defense, in literal law,
and
not
that's exactly it. So all I wanted to do, and it's a big problem to solve, is to start to introduce a platform and introduce a set of services and tools that actually makes that whole process more transparent, that reduces the amount of time that exchanges and data publishers are putting into manual audits, and helps the clients themselves work out, for instance, whether they are underutilizing their data contracts. So
And how do you do that? Because that is difficult.
it is difficult. So it's difficult for a number of reasons, but it's also simple in what you're trying to solve. So that's the good side of things.
Hit us with the simple
Yeah.
description.
So the simple is, if you have a platform that is able to understand the various contracts that are out there, and I say understand, I'm not explaining whether that's done with AI or with people or whatever, but understand the terms and conditions of the elements of the contract. And then you have a platform that is able to audit and log when contracts are exchanged, when they are updated, whether who's signed off on them, when they need to be renewed, and so all of that stuff which is manual, if that's taken away and that's automated, and then if all of these sort of contractual transactions are actually recorded on a mutable ledger that shows where it is in a contract, so that it's available not only for the data publishers themselves, but also the clients, and they can say, oh yeah, actually, we had a master services agreement that lasted 3 years. That's coming up for renewal in 6 months' time, and actually, we don't need this, but we do need this, and so on and so forth. So if you're able to access that in a computer system as opposed to basically going back through the paper contract, but then in addition to that, and this is where it becomes even more difficult to grip as a whole end-to-end service, and I'll say a little bit about that in a minute. If the contracts that you've got on that system are actually live, so and they're living, so what do I mean by that? Unlike, say, a contract that somebody's got in a PDF form, actually the elements of that contract that are in maybe a PDF form around how you can use your data, which products can be used in which locations, what can be used for redistribution, what can be used for the different business types, can be used for risk compliance, what are the licenses. If all of that can be reported back on automatically, either through links into existing entitlement systems, or where there's not existing entitlement systems, basically automated declarations, and then all recorded through that digital contract network, you have a full sort of end-to-end platform that manages the whole life cycle from I want market data to this is the market data I want. Oh, these are the checks and balances. Am I allowed the market data? Am I a good enough client? Yes, I am. Okay. Here's the provision of your market data after the contract has been agreed and signed. And then when you get the market data, then this is where the new aspect of DRDM comes in. It doesn't stop there. It follows the usage of that data and reports it against the rights of the contract. So you have a full 360-degree view as a data producer of where your data is not only being consumed, but also redistributed as well. So that's a lot of information.
I mean, again, we can only scratch the surface now. But I mean, does that mean that somehow your description of contractual obligations and what have you, does it attach itself to the data? Because the data's gone shooting off in lots of different directions. And you're
So,
somehow wanting to keep track of it. How
so it's a great question, but no, it doesn't, because you would never want to interfere with the market data stream. The minute that you introduce any kind of data fingerprint into the data itself, effectively you're introducing more data to deliver and potentially latency and so on and so forth. So and that's what I was saying about then you've got all of the integration with existing
so
systems.
how does this system this keep an eye on that data? How does it know where that data's gone and what's being done with it?
So it concentrates on the live contract across the digital contract network. So it looks at the contract, the rights of the contract, and the usage of the data is reported into the digital contract network and platform. So it's done in terms of reporting on what's actually consumed and used. The big issue you've got is that the systems that you have out there in organizations, permission systems, entitlement systems, they're not really entitlement systems per se. They're not really saying, am I contractually allowed to use that data in this way? They're, yes, I'm allowed to use the data. No, I'm not allowed to use the data. Or yes, I can have it on demand.
Because there's an iteration before you read the contracts and decide whether that person is allowed
Yeah.
to.
Whereas what this system does is it's an automated system that basically is aware of what the contractual rights are and can marry that up into a set of very nice sort of views of that usage for both the client and the data producer.
Does that mean that this system, your system that you're proposing, needs to integrate or communicate with usage reporting systems?
Yeah. So two things. So it takes data from some of the usage reported systems that we know and love.
That are perfect and get it absolutely right all the time.
And then it does sort of some fuzzy matching. So one of the problems you've got is, for instance, if you get data from, say, an LSEG distribution platform, you'll have product codes that don't necessarily marry up with the exchange product codes. So it has a map that comes out and says, okay, this is from this exchange, and we believe it's this, and you go through the process, you verify that sort of mapping. Next time that you have to put in a set of declarations, it's a little bit more automated because you build up the map first time round, and then you may be a firm that doesn't have permissions or an entitlement system. So basically, then it's down to periodic automated declarations that come from the vendor or the exchange, and then what happens is that pops into the in tray, and it says, actually, you've been asked to do your declaration on the following items that are in your contract, because of course, being a living contract, it's already aware of what's in there. And then there's obviously at that point still a manual response, because not everybody has automated usage. So you get a blended view, and all of this is done without the intervention of teams having to go out and send letters off and send off that response for email response for declarations, you name it. This is scheduled. You can decide, is that done on a yearly basis? You can decide that, for instance, you might want to concentrate on a certain area for a certain client. So you've got all of that aspect as well. And then all of that process of the response to declaration, be it a blended, some of it is automated, 70% is automated, 30% is manual. It shows you the blended report. And it also allows you to do things like, deal with misunderstandings around, actually that's for use for developers versus production versus backup.
And that I was beginning to think about that, because one of the issues I've been aware of when I've heard other people talking about this problem domain is you're talking about having these contractual obligations automated and working in an automatic way, but that implies that they are computer readable, computer understandable. And one of the issues is the contracts are written in English. Well, maybe some of them written in French, I don't know, but they're written in language, not computer language, but natural language. And an observation that is often made is they're often ambiguous. I mean, as a more conspiracy theory, are they deliberately ambiguous or are they just naturally ambiguous? But why ever they are, some of those terms and conditions are ambiguous. And again, going back to a point you made way back, different exchanges, different entities express their contractual terms in different ways and use different phraseology to mean the same thing. And my head is already hurting. But this is the general problem of the industry. Have you solved that, or are you affected by that?
We're definitely affected by it. I've definitely not solved it. We as a firm have definitely not solved it. We've got a solution which we believe is certainly improves the situation. And I think there's a couple of ways that you can approach this. You could look at all of the exchanges and data publishers out there and try and work on a way of normalizing into a single contract. And I don't think that'll ever work, because I don't think it should ever work either, because, as I think I mentioned earlier,
there has been some discussion about standardization of terms, not terms and conditions, but just what do we call something? Use the word redistribution.
Yeah.
Is redistribution as a word absolutely unambiguous and clearly understood by everybody? I don't know.
I can guarantee if you were to get the legal team of the top 20 sell-side banks represented in a room, we'd still be here 10 years later. So,
and I mean, because we have collectively as an industry been trying to solve this, and I hate to say this, sort of failing miserably. Maybe not failing miserably. Not really succeeding.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to try these things, and what we've done at Broadhead around our sort of DRDM platform is we took a slightly different approach. We basically looked at we said, okay, what if we didn't know what market data is, and what if we were learning right now what market data is in its current world? So we kind of looked at how market data is built up in different asset classes. We looked at how exchanges and providers produce products and their sort of variation, and we're putting this all on a big sort of whiteboard. We then looked at the business uses for that data, all the way from automated to a desk to display on wallboards to compliance to all of the different sort of business usages out there. And then we looked at how you can transmit the information, a slightly more technology focused view. Is it full tick data? Is it delayed data? Is it data that's conflated? If it's conflated, is the update once a second, once every 5 seconds? Is there different price points you can associate it to a transmission type? And then we looked at the consumption side, and we said, okay, with all of that, all of the asset classes, all the products, all the transmission types, how could you consume that data in a modern age? Is it an eyeball person looking at a screen? Is it a host? And if it's a host, how do you count that a host? Is it by CPU? If it's CPU, is it cores? And then we looked at cloud computing and, the ability for software to burst where there's large requirements. So, say a large macroeconomic event, and you have a program that it wants to all of a sudden get access to more global macro economic data that it doesn't usually, how you sort of scale that and how you would reflect that if you were doing pricing, terms and conditions, but didn't know what market data was. So we built up this sort of itemized view, which is what we consider our sort of basic elements of a contract. So not the English terms that you see. So that will always be there. That will be very different depending on who the producer is. So that's all part of it, and that's digitally signed and either accepted, negotiated, or denied. But actually, what we were concentrating was on those elements. So actually, this was in WIFIC in Prague many
Oh,
moons
wow.
ago.
Prague. Yeah. 2022.
We'd built the platform. We'd done exactly what you're told never to do. You build a platform first, and then we go out and then we look for clients. So you never do that, but of course we did it because we're a bunch of techies with commercial people that enjoy doing things in sometimes the wrong way. We built a platform which was running back in 2022, and that was the Digital Contract Network. Because what I wanted to make sure was that we actually had a global distribution network for these digital contracts, these digital smart contracts. That is not, an Ethereum. It's not a blockchain that's built by somebody else. It's built specifically for the use for what we've got within market data contracts, and it deals with the areas of cybersecurity that's really important. Making sure if you've got the same ledger on your node as another client, you can't look up somebody else's bit of information. So we built all that, and then we realised that we were happy with the platform because we've got this glue. And then since then, we've obviously building the product base on top of that. So
where I'm conscious of time. I mean, from my understanding, because you and I have spoken quite a lot about this, I'm getting the sense you're getting most interest, most traction with the data providers themselves, the sort of exchanges, as opposed to your old role of sitting in UBS or one of the big investment banks. So is it more the producers and the distributors of data?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was always our first target audience. This is a service and a platform designed to make the lives of exchanges and data producers far more easier than it is at the moment. It was designed to help reduce the discrepancies that they have with all that's going on the manual side. Realize some of their sort of lost revenues that they've got through this sort of large and very manual process. So that was most definitely the original sort of target audience that we had, and obviously where we started working. What we have, realized on top of that over the last year is that actually there's also a lot more of the consumer side where they want to get a much better view of their market data digital rights internally. So if you take firms that have, for instance, had lots of acquisitions of other firms, and they have all of these very individual segmented contracts, there's that sort of internal use case as well. So they've been looking at it for actually, we can pre-prepare our declarations now, because we're in a position where, as we're able to interpret those elements as mentioned earlier from contracts, we're able to, when we do get a manual audit from an exchange that's not using the DRDM platform, we already have pretty much our declaration ducks in a row because we're organized. So there's a slightly separate side as well.
I mean, again, I remember talking to you about this a couple of years ago. It's very easy to go out and sell vaporware or PowerPointware and whatever, but you were very conscious of building something.
Yeah.
And I know you've been talking to a lot of people and you've been getting a lot of positive reactions. I know that. I've seen that. But is this being used in anger? Is this beyond beta? What is this? Is this alpha testing, beta testing? Is this in production?
So it's in production, and but I guess, what has not been successful is that, I think, strangely enough, you kind of mentioned it earlier. It's quite a large proposition to get in your mind.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
And we'd realised that not just from going out to talking to exchanges and data producers, going in with this whole platform that takes digital contracts to tracking the data to dealing with looking at where your data is going on the globe, and so it was just too much because, of course, like every firm, there's lots of different departments looking for different things at different times. One department may be ready, one department may be not. So actually, what we did was something really straightforward. We segmented our entire platform into sort of four areas. One is the digital contract piece. So that's basically helping exchanges themselves just have a digitized contract that is they're able to look at renewals, they're able to look at price increases, they're able to look at where there's firms doing sort of mergers and acquisitions, and it's indexed. They're able to inspect and get access to that information very quickly. So that was one area. Then there's the secondary area, which is the automated declarations piece. So that's, now that you've got these contracts, you also can use the fact that they are living on this digital contract network, and you can inspect the data, and you can start to basically go out and help that audit process and get the revenue back. And then there's the third area, which is basically helping sales for data publishers as well, because now you've got all this in an elementized view. You can actually start to ask questions within the sort of AI unit, and you can say, we've got a new wheat product coming out in the US. Show me the clients that have been consuming similar products across our portfolio, and you can start to leverage that for sales tools as well. So things like targeted notifications of products. There's also a slight reverse of that, and that's that if a data publisher chooses, they can actually also publish their pricing and their product pricing within the digital contract network as well. So as a consumer, if you're after a set of top 100 products in wherever it is, you can ask for that, and anybody that's publishing, you've got access to that sort of contractual supermarket. So it helps that process as well. And then,
sorry, go with the,
I was just
the
going to
fourth
say,
one.
and then the final piece, which is actually the bit that sort of orchestrates everything, and that's the efficiency workflow. So because all of these steps have lots of external steps, maybe sort of KYC checks, credit checks, sending out emails when there's various changes, so on and so forth. So we've got an orchestrator that allows you to obviously plug in along the way. So selling that as a whole, and that's ultimately what you are trying to do as a firm. You're trying to sell something that you believe is an advantage to the people that will buy it. It's as a whole platform, it's quite a lot to bite off in one go. So,
and
that's why I'm not a sales guy.
No. Well, you've got, but yeah. So look, I mean, we could talk for hours on this, but we're not allowed to, because I'm trying to keep these as a manageable, digestible chunk so people can listen to them on their commute or whatever it is. Alan, as a way of wrapping up, what do you see as what do you see coming in the short term with your DRDM project? Give us quickly a swift little wrap up on that, and then just a very quick high level view of the market data industry as a whole. What are you, 2 or 3 little pithy points about your project and the industry as a whole?
Yeah, for our program and our product, you'll start to see some new products and services emerging from a few different data producers over the next year. And I think that hopefully, sort of anybody that starts to use the platform will go, why didn't somebody else do that? So that's.
So watch this. So this year is the year. I mean, you've been working on it since way back 2022,
Yeah.
but it's starting to actually be out there. So that's and people can come and talk to you and they'll find you. Okay, and then beyond in the wider, Mark, what are you seeing out there? What's your sense of what's going on?
So I'm really excited about the what we're going to see on the sort of managed service and cloud service provider space. I think that pause that we're perhaps all feeling in our gut at the moment about where things are going is going to start to we're going to start to see some things also materializing over the next year, which will if you are a consumer of market data, be it a decision maker in procurement or a decision maker on the technology side, I think we're going to start to see some things that you can go, that makes sense. We've actually got a bit of an evolution coming out now, and I'm very optimistic about what I'm hearing from.
And is that this as a service? Is that at the heart of what your positivity is coming from? And you think there's some innovation out there that's going to help
most definitely, and that the big sort of questions about what we have and do we migrate, it becomes a little bit more of an easy decision if you feel you're going to something that actually does give you some advantage and does give you something that's manageable and does give you access to multiple sources of information that you may not have had so easily and instantaneously in the past. So,
Alan, this has been a pleasure. I think when we meet up in person, we tend to have 3-hour conversations.
Yeah.
So I don't think we can impose those on our friends out there in the audience. So I've tried to be disciplined, and because I enjoy chatting with you. So look, Alan, thank you so much for being on David Anderson Talking Market Data. I'm sure you'll be a repeat guest, and I look forward to catching up in person sometime soon.
Thank you, David. A pleasure.